What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you part 3 of our Pillars of Eternity series. So just as a reminder, we will just be covering the main plot. We're not really touching on side quests so much, we're mostly just focused on the critical path. And in our previous episode, we arrived in Defiance Bay, found out exactly who it is we've been tracking down, which is none other than Thaos Ix Arcanon, as well as the Leaden Key's overall goal, and that they are personally responsible for the Hollowborn crisis, otherwise known as Widewind's Legacy. And at the end of the act, we escaped Defiance Bay, who had descended into riots, and continued on with our new goal of tracking Thaos down in the city known as Twin Elms. Now, on our way there, we are going to be attacked by assassins, because the Leaden Key wants us dead at this point, as well as have another vision just outside of Twin Elms of the female apostate that Thaos seemed to have been trying to quell, as our Watcher abilities give us more and more visions of the past. So when we reach Twin Elms, we are going to arrive in the Hearthsong district. Now, Twin Elms is a Glenfathan settlement, and as such, and especially because of all the events that just happened in Defiance Bay, refugees are only allowed in Hearthsong without permission from one of the 6 Glenfathan tribes. The Glenfathan tribes live among what they call the Builders' Ruins, the Builders being the ancient society of Ingwithans who built all of these ruins of the machines we've been finding along the way. Now, the guards at the gate point us to one of the tribe leaders, who is in Hearthsong, who can potentially give us permission to explore the rest of the city and go to the larger area. So we need to go talk to that leader straight away. She is in a building called the Passage of the Six. Now, when we speak to this woman, we basically just need to tell her that we are looking for Thaos and we're requesting permission to enter the rest of the city. Now, initially, she declines this because apparently Thaos caused some sort of problem when he came through the first time. Your Watcher abilities kick in, and you see a second Orlin, who seems to be of the same family lineage, who starts giving you information to tell this woman, phrases that only they would know. And through this woman realizes that you're someone that can be trusted to pass through the city without destroying things that the Glenfathans consider sacred. She also explains, at least briefly, that when Thaos was allowed through, he seems to have desecrated some sacred site. But after this conversation concludes, we should have permission to explore the other districts of Twin Elms. And when we go to the tower that is actually called Ter Evron, we're going to have yet more visions of this previous Leaden Key life that our soul used to live. If you hadn't pieced that together by now, these visions are of a previous life that has awakened in you from the Bioac at the beginning of the game. So this vision, Thaos is instructing our previous life to track down Iavara. Iavara, of course, being the female apostate that has been spreading some sort of false faith, according to Thaos, and needs to be stopped. And he tasks you with that. Now, once you actually approach the Tower of Ter Evron and the Twin Elves that are wrapped around it, you will be confronted by 2 Delmegan, I believe they're called, but basically they're like dryads. So they'll basically ask you why you want through, and you can tell them about chasing Thaos. They, being rather ancient Delmegan, can actually see your connection to Thaos and that you are an awakened soul who's tracking him down. However, they explain that even if you catch Thaos, he can't undo an awakening, that once a soul is awakened, there is no unawakening it. However, they do explain that if you can give this awakened soul peace, you might be able to overcome it that way. So when souls awaken, it's typically for a reason. And for whatever reason, the soul that awakened in you of this past life seems very connected to Thaos. And they explain that, while again, the awakening can't be undone, you might be able to resolve the situation to give that soul peace. And then from there, they go on to explain that Thaos came through Ter Evron, went through a path to a place called Sun and Shadow. However, he used some sort of magic to destroy the path behind him, thus the desecrating a sacred site that was mentioned earlier. They further explained that in order to get to Sun and Shadow now, you're going to have to go to a place called Burial Isle that has a great pit at the center of it, and you're basically going to have to jump down this pit. But there is no way to survive this. They make that very clear. And because of that, the only way down this pit safely is to contact the gods. And from here, they explain that Tir Evron is the place where it's possible to commune with them, that it is a place that pierces the shroud, that is the veil between life and death, otherwise known as the Hall of Stars, and that if you go inside Tir Evron and pray to these gods, they might just answer you. And that's exactly what you go to do. So you walk into Tir Evron after this conversation with the two Delmegan. You walk into a room. You can activate the altar at the center of the room, which activates 4 other altars to pray to. These 4 altars represent the 4 groups of gods we're about to talk about. Pillars of Eternity universe actually has many gods, so much more than 4. So they kind of grouped them together a little bit to explain that gods with similar decisions in a later matter. But for right now, what you basically need to know is that you can pray to Rimmergrand, Galawain, Hylia, or Barath. And what they're going to do here is that each one of these is going to give you a quest. Specifically, these side quests are known as appeasement quests, where basically the gods are going to give you a quest, and if you complete it and come back to them, they'll talk to you. So explaining what all of them are, Rimmergand, if you pray to that altar, he wants you to go to a place called Noonfrost, which is in Twin Elms. It's actually a shrine to Rimmergand, where a bunch of pale elves who worship him are trying to open what is called the Frost-Hewn Breach. They're doing this because Rimmergand is the god of entropy. He is true death. As I explained previously, souls in this world get recycled and they live again and again. However, Rimmergand can eventually destroy souls completely toward the true end. And because of this, these pale elves want to hasten that process, which Rimmergand is not a big fan of, so he sends you to put a stop to it and to seal the breach. And if you do that and come back, that group of gods will talk to you. Galawain wants you to help a situation at his shrine in Twin Elms, known as the Maw, where basically there is a conflict between 2 great beasts there, and you need to settle it. It doesn't matter how you settle it, but make sure only one of them comes out on top, and then come back, and Galawain will speak to you. If you pray to Hylia, she asks you to go to her shrine, also in Twin Elms, and take care of the giant beast that has decided to take roost on her shrine. It turns out to be a sky dragon, by the way. And then there is the last one, Barath. So Barath will give you a quest to kill 2 people that have extended their life long beyond what it should, and she asks you to return them to the wheel, because Barath is the god of life and death. So once you do any of these quests, you can come back and talk to, again, the shrine you prayed to, and there will be a bunch of dialogue about your decisions for that quest, but then more importantly, it'll get into the more important stuff. The gods at this point will explain that Thaos serves the goddess Woedica, and the reason Thaos has been trapping all of these Hollowborn souls, as we've learned in previous episodes, but just to recap, Thaos and the Leaden Key caused the Hollowborn crisis, and as we also found out in Defiance Bay, that they have been moving all of the souls that they are depriving of these children to a central location, which turns out to be here, a place called Sun and Shadow, which I had mentioned earlier. And his plan is to give all of these souls to empower Woedica, thus raising Woedica above even the other gods, and allowing her to rule all and everything. They also explain that Woedica and Thaos fear animancy because it discredits gods. Now, interestingly enough, all of the other gods are actually seemingly okay with animancy because they believe it is the kith, that being sentient humanoids. It is their goal and burden and, honestly, their own volition to chase down and find ways to improve upon their own souls and their lives. Basically, the other gods believe it's none of their business if the mortal races are out here pursuing animancy, whereas Woedica and her servant Thaos have a big problem with it. Now, more importantly, the other gods won't step in to stop Thaos directly because the gods have actually all entered into a pact not to personally involve themselves with the kith, because it never ends well, as they have established many times. So Woedica, while it might not seem like it initially, is actually also following this pact. You'll notice that she has not directly involved herself in any of these events. She directs Thaos, who acts in her stead. Now, the next part we learn is probably the most important part. Each group of these gods that we can potentially help will explain that they want you to go down to Sun and Shadow, they want you to kill Thaos, and they want you to go to the machine where he has all of these Hollowborn souls trapped and disperse them. However, Each group of gods, all 4 different groups, wants you to do something different with the souls. Rimmergand wants you to consign them to oblivion. Galawain wants you to send them back to the Deerwood to empower all of the citizens there. Hylia wants you to return them to the children they actually belonged to, so they can live the lives they were supposed to live. And Barath wants you just to return the souls to the wheel, to not fix the Hollowborn crisis, but to just return them so they continue on with their cycle of rebirth like they're supposed to. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So this is a big decision, and it will affect the ending slides of this game. But more importantly, depending on your choices and whether or not you choose to adhere to them, you can actually affect the second game a lot with this as well. You can pledge to help one of these groups of gods, and they'll give you power to help you later. You can choose not to actually help any of them. You can agree to not actually make a pact with any of them. Or you can make that pact with them like I just mentioned. But interestingly enough, you can make that pact and then also break it. Now that right there has big consequences in the next game. So, like, there will be all sorts of stuff. It affects the world state, like the game itself plays out pretty much the same way. But interestingly enough, you can make these pacts, break them, and do something else, and that will have effects on Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. Again, just kind of like the world state, not necessarily like the actual overall narrative. Nonetheless, it's probably the biggest decision of the game, and it's kind of choosing like the biggest ending of it. But luckily, we don't have to make any of that right now. Unless you, of course, choose to make a pledge and then don't follow through. But basically, it's the start of the end, shall we say. Now, as we leave Tir Everon from this conversation, we'll have visions of Iovara once again, where Thaos, again, is talking to your previous life and tells you that they've put up with Iovara long enough, that she needs to be captured and made to confess before all of the Leaden Key. Thaos dispatches you to do this, and he tells you to find a way to get Iovara to move to a place called Osinius, where she won't be protected by an army, and thus can be captured by the Leaden Key. Now from here, we can head out to a place called the Burial Isle, where that giant pit is, now that we've talked to the gods. Because in addition to all the things I mentioned, they also agree, regardless of whether or not you make pacts with them, that they will let you jump down the pit and land safely in the area just outside Sun and Shadow. And we head to Burial Isle by going to the place called Old Song in Twin Elms, and there is a boat there that will actually take us to the Burial Isle. And once we get there, as we travel to the pit that we are looking for, we will see many different visions of Iovara and others being tortured, as well as a few visions of your relationship with Iovara, because apparently when you had first joined the Leaden Key in your previous life, Iovara had mentored you and taught you the wrong things, and then Iovara made a discovery, turned from the Leaden Key's ways, and then also tried to turn you, but then you were sent to round her up and capture her, which is where she then tried to teach you the different ways that she had come to realize herself. But ultimately, you still turned her into the Leaden Key, and thus she was captured by Thaos and tortured. These are all visions that we see on Burial Isle here. And then finally, we can find the pit and then leap into it. And as long as you made those deals with, well, at least did some of the side quests for the gods that I mentioned, you shouldn't fall to your death. And this is actually the end of Act 3. So, in this act, we mostly did some tracking down of Thaos, talked to the actual gods who have decided to help us track down Thaos because he's trying to empower Wodica, and they would prefer that her, not be empowered. And so, ends Act 3. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe. The next video will be the last one for this series, but in the meantime, may you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.